Okay, I just have to turn the volume off once it goes on. Okay, so what we're going to do is like this. Mir Hashem, you all have a copy of the Hagadah. Does everybody have one? Okay, so what I would like to do, I gave last year shir, which is on YouTube, which I'll post if anybody needs it, which is basically, all of the halachos of like how to run a Seder, because last year, for the first time in Klal Yisrael's history, there were more individual Sedarim, than ever before, because so many people were alone for the first time, and so many families had to split up. And, we spoke about that last year, that probably like since Yetzias Mitzrayim, there were more Pesach Sedarim held last year than probably any time in history. You know what I mean? Because almost every single individual family did it by themselves. And Pesach is almost always a time that families get together. So a lot of people were running a Seder for the first time. So I gave a whole shir last year. I gave a whole shir last year on how to run a Seder and how to do the whole thing properly and halachically the whole way through. So I'm not going to go over that tonight. Today, what I want to do is to go through the Seder. And we're going to learn the whole thing through as we go, understand what it is we're reading. Any of the halachos that come up along the way, we'll go into, just to address. But what I'd really like to do, and it's obviously going to take more than just this one sitting, hopefully in the, two, we'll make some headway. But I think, the Hagadah itself is a collection of Ma'amarei Chazal. It's basically a Mishnah or a set of Mishnayos. Together, mixed in with it are various brachos and Mizmorei Tehillim and Piyutim. But it's basically the main chunk of the Hagadah is a set of Mishnayos. And we want to understand what it is that we're reading and understand what we're saying and why we're saying it and why is the Hagadah bringing in all of these pieces all along the way. So I'd really like to kind of just do what we call in learning a Bekius shir on the Hagadah. We're not going to go be'iyun, we're not going to delve into each one of the mamarim and what, which of course, as you all know, I'm sure there are tons and tons of svarim and books on the Hagadah, right? It's like one of the svarim in Klal Yisrael that we have more svarim on it than almost anything else. And we've got tons of books in English, in Hebrew, and downstairs in the base medrash, there's I think 2 full shelves of Haggadahs, and it's there's tons and tons to see on the Hagadah. What I would like to do is to sort of give us a launching pad, right? To go through it as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and as on a surface level. And then from there, you can take notes for yourself and think about things that you want to look into more and come up with questions that you want to ask, and to be able to go deeper into the whole story of the Hagadah and the mitzvos and the halachos, etc. So that's what I would like to do. Okay, the mitzvah of the Hagadah, to go through the Hagadah, is that on Leil Pesach, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. So then we had the korban that we brought on Erev Pesach. Everybody would shech the korban Pesach, and then we would eat it at night as part of the Yantif Seudah, while telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, exactly basically the same way that we do it today. And nowadays, we don't anymore have the Korban Pesach, but there still are many mitzvos that need to be done on this night. And the mitzvos need to be done al ha-seder. They have to be done in a particular order, right? Let's say, there's the mitzvah of matzah and maror and arba kosos, right? So you can't just drink 4 cups of wine at the beginning and say the brachos and then eat matzah and maror and go to bed. It won't work, right? The whole mitzvah of the night, all the mitzvahs of the night have to be fulfilled al ha-seder. And that's really where the lashon comes from, the seder. And that's why we start the seder with the seder, right? The Hagadah begins. It's not just like a cute song, kadesh urchatz, right? Every single Hagadah begins with this. It's part of the night is to say the Seder, because the whole night is about Seder. It's all about the order and the way in which things are set up and done. And along the way, we'll explain why things are in the order that they are. But that's very important to understand, that the whole setup of the Hagadah is very, very specific and very set. And that's why we start out by going through the table of contents. This almost, I don't know of any other sefer, Mishnah or Gemara or anything that has a table of contents at the beginning. That's mamish what it is. We start by going through the table of contents. So even before we get to Kiddush, every home has their minhag and their tune and their way that they go through it. But even if you're saying the Hagadah by yourself and you're alone for Pesach, you have to say their kadesh urchatz, right? So let's just go through it. We'll translate each one along the way. even though we may know many of these already, let's just go through. Kadesh is making kiddush. That's the first mitzvah d'oraisa of the night. The first mitzvah d'oraisa of the night is kiddush. This is a mitzvah on every Shabbos or Yantif to make kiddush at night is a mitzvah d'oraisa, and we make it on wine or grape juice, and that's going to be the first of the Dalid Kosos. Right, we have a mitzvah to have 4 specific cups of grape juice or wine on the Seder night. Connected the 4 lashonos of Geula, the Lotzeti, the Itzalti, the Gaalti, the Lakachti, right? The Lotzesi. Say again, I don't. The Gaalti, the Lakachti, right? The 4 lashonos of Geula that the Torah says. So we have four cups of wine that correspond to each one of those, and the first one is kadesh. So it's just important to remember. We'll get to kiddush in a minute. Okay, kadesh. Urchatz is when we wash for the karpas. We wash for the vegetables. Karpas, we make a bread pri hadama, and we eat any hadama vegetable. So when we get to karpas, we'll speak about why and what we do. Yachatz, the next piece, that's when we break the middle matzah. Right, we break the matzah, and we take the smaller piece and return it, and we take the larger piece and we put it away for later. Okay, Magid, this is the second mitzvah d'oraisa of the night, right? The first mitzvah d'oraisa was Kiddush. The second mitzvah d'oraisa is Hagadah labincha, the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, Magid. So that's very important. It's a mitzvah min haTorah to do. Rachza, now we wash for bread, right? We wash the Tilas Yadayim like we always do for Hamotzi. Motzi is when we get to the second mitzvah d'oraisa, third mitzvah d'oraisa of the night, and that is the mitzvah of achilas matzah. There's a mitzvah min haTorah for every Jew on Leil Pesach to eat a kazayis of matzah. So we'll talk about that when we get there, but that's the mitzvah of motzi. And then matzah, we say a motzi and the bracha of al achilas matzah. Okay, maror is when we eat the bitter herbs. Most people have either horseradish or lettuce, main lettuce. We'll talk about that when we get there. Korech is when we wrap it all together, right? In the olden days, they would take maror and wrap it in with the carbon pesach and eat it in a lafa. Like basically the matzahs back then were like a lafa, like a soft type of a, lafa. So they would eat, that was how they would eat it. Al matzos and marorim yochluhu. And we'll get to what the Indian is over there, but we know the idea of maror is to remember the bitterness while we are remembering the salvation. Right? We don't just focus on the fact that we were saved, we focus on the difficulty that there was before, and that's signified by the mitzvah of maror. The mitzvah of maror in the times of the Beis HaMikdash and the times of the Karban, the mitzvah of maror is midoraisa, the mitzvah is min haTorah. However, nowadays, hopefully this year will be different already, but so far up until now, the mitzvah of maror is only midrabanan, right? As opposed to matzah, which is min haTorah still, right? Maror is midrabanan nowadays. Then we have shulchan orech, that's where we eat the meal and have the main yantif seuda, and talk more about Yetzias Mitzrayim and talk about the Kriyas Yamsuf and all those things. Safon, that is when we have the afikomen. Afikomen is like keneged the carbon pesach that we used to eat. So we don't have the pesach anymore. So we eat the afikomen, and according to the Mekubalim, it's exactly the same thing. It's not just like a zecher to the idea that we had a carbon pesach in those days, right? In those days, eating the carbon pesach did something to us, which hopefully we'll get to it when we get there. And today we don't have the carbon pesach, but the afikomen does that to us. It's not just like a remembering. Al pi halacha, it's considered. The Gemara talks about it as it being a zecher, but as far as the tikkun that happens, as far as the change that happens in the spiritual world, right? So eating afikomen nowadays does that. So very important mitzvah. Then barech, we have the third. Oh, we skipped the second cup. It's the end of Magid, right? I'm sorry. Between Magid and Rachza, the end of Magid is the second cup, second of the 4 kosos. The third of the 4 kosos is now after benching, right? We bench and we bench on a kos, even though some people bench on a kos all the time. Some people just on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but here on Pesach, the Seder, everybody benches on a kos. Then Hallel. We have Hallel, which is we started saying Hallel at the end of Magid, The end of Magid is a whole chunk of the beginning of Hallel, but we finish with Hallel. And Hallel culminates with the fourth kos, the fourth of the four cups at the end of Hallel. And then finally, Nirtza is the piyutim, the songs that we sing after the Hagadah, Hagadah and Echad Miyodeya and the very, Chasal Seder Pesach, etc., the various songs that we have. Okay, so that is the Seder of the night. We went over, the overview of which mitzvahs are min haTorah, which are midrabanan, and now I want to just go through, starting from the beginning, starting from kadesh, and go through what it is that we are saying and doing at each part of the Hagadah. Okay, so we begin with kadesh. Before kiddush, obviously we pour a cup. Now we do kadesh differently than kiddush every other week. Every Shabbos or Yantif in most homes, usually the balabayis, the father, makes kiddush, and he's the one holding the cup, and everybody is yotzei with him. Now, what does that mean? They're yotzei with him. Really, everybody is saying kiddush. Right? There's a mitzvah min haTorah on every Jew to say kiddush on Leil Shabbos and Leil Yantif. Right? We say it by shomea ka'oneh, by listening to somebody else say kiddush, and him holding the cup, or she. Could be a woman just the same. By Shomea Ka'oneh, it's as if we are saying Kiddush at the table. And that's how we are Yotzei, every week. On the Pesach Seder, the difference that we do is that everybody has a cup.
Cast iron is not the same difference?
In terms of what? Kashering? Yeah. Anything goes through a self-cleaning oven is kosher. It's new. It's like it's brand new. Panim Chadashos. So the difference by the Seder is that even though you're still going to be yotzei with Shomea Ka'oneh, although by the Seder, some people, everybody sings along, which is fine if everybody wants to say Kiddush. But if not, then one person says Kiddush, but because there's a mitzvah of Dalit Kosos, and that mitzvah is on each individual, so everybody has to be holding the cup. Right? In other words, as opposed to a regular Shabbos where it's a mitzvah to drink from the cup, and you don't have to. You could hear Kiddush and then just go and wash, as long as the person who makes Kiddush drinks from it, etc. Right? But on Leil Seder, everybody has a mitzvah of Dalit Kosos. So for Kiddush, everybody has a cup of grape juice or wine in front of them, and everybody raises up that kos when it comes to listening to Kiddush, and again, you're saying Kiddush over your own cup of grape juice. Okay, and the minhag of the night is to try to express the fact that we are free people and b'nei chorin. So the minhag is usually that other people pour for us, right? That we try to make it be that we're not the ones filling up our own cup of grape juice or wine, but we fill up for our friend and they fill up for us. So everybody experiences that experience of freedom of having their kos filled for them. Okay, so the cups are filled and we're ready for kadesh. It's not this year, it's Motzei Shabbos, so it's we have a complicated Havdalah and Kiddush that we say, which we'll go through now. But if it's a year where it's on Friday nights, then you start with the regular Vayichulu, right? Like on a regular Leil Shabbos, it's an Indian to say Vayichulu a number of times Leil Shabbos, the third one being at Kiddush. So on a Pesach that falls out on Leil Shabbos, we would do that also. We start with Vayichulu and we continue from there. But this year we don't have that. So this year we start from the regular Brei Pri Hagafen. Okay, so we know that there's this concept of Yak Nahaz, of Yayin, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah, Zman, Yak Nahaz, and that's the order in which we're going to make all of the brachos. So we start with Yayin, which is Brei Pri Hagafen, right? So everybody's holding their cup, and we say either again together, or the person who's making Kiddush makes the bracha, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Brei Pri Hagafen. So that's Yud of Yak Nahaz. Next is Kuf, which is Kiddush, right? So now we follow along what it says in the Hagadah. So let's learn the Kiddush of Leil Yantif. What are we saying when we say this Kiddush? Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. So this, the standard opening of a bracha where we recognize Hashem as the master of the universe, the master of the world, and at the same time, we recognize Hashem's intimate closeness to us in every bracha, right? How do we see that? Because every bracha starts with you. We say you to Hashem, right? We address Hashem, mamish, in second person, Baruch Atah. And then we switch to third person, Hashem, Elokeinu, Melech HaOlam, right? We're overwhelmed with Hashem's awesomeness and greatness that we switch over to third person, right? But every bracha has in it this concept, this idea that Hashem is closer than anything to us and farther than anything from us, right? In terms of his hashgacha, in terms of his investment and care, so he's karov mikol hakrovim, closer than anybody could possibly be, right? But as far as his greatness and his awesomeness, so he's rachok mikol rachokim, right? He's as distant and awesome as anything could be, right? So that's always in every bracha. That's what you should try to have in mind. That's what we're expressing. Okay, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bochar banu mikol am. Right, so this is in every kiddush for Yantif. We say this lashon, a lashon of Hashem choosing us. He selected us from all the nations. And he elevated us, and he made us holy with his mitzvos. Right, so this is a tremendous chesed that Hashem did for us. That he, allows us to be his people. He allows us to tap in to this unbelievable, incredible, holy system that he, made that runs the world, and he lets us access that, and he lets us not just access it, right? Imagine, Lahavdil, like the greatest scientists in the world, learning their science and learning what it is that they're learning, and not only are they gaining tremendous knowledge, and it's incredible, but at the same time, it changes them and makes them into different people, right? So, but that's what the Torah does for us. It's not just that we get to know these things and learn these things and be with Hashem, right? But he sanctifies us and makes us holy in the process. V'titein lanu Hashem Elokeinu bi'ahava, and Hashem gave us with his tremendous love moadim l'simcha, right? Yamim tovim, in order to enjoy chagim uzmanim l'sason, and different times of the year that we have in order to rejoice. Right, and again, we don't mention Shabbos this year, but in a year where it comes out on Leil Shabbos, so then there's also the mentioning of Shabbos, because that's also part of these gifts that Hashem gave us. Okay, and then we say as Yom Chag Hamatzos Hazeh Zman Cheruseinu. Okay, so we see now Pesach is referred to in the Hagadah for the first time, in two different ways. Right, Chag Hamatzos Hazeh and Zman Cheruseinu. And that's a very important idea, because this dichotomy, this split, which is going to be the defining line through the whole Hagadah. The whole Hagadah is focusing on these two aspects of Klal Yisrael, right? How low we were and how difficult it was and how much trouble we were in, right? Versus how incredible the Yeshua was and how great the leaving of Mitzrayim was and how close Hashem brought us to him. Right, and that's already we say this in Kiddush. Chag hamatzos hazeh, right? What does matzah refer to? It refers to the lechem oni, right? The bread of our affliction, right? That's a poor man's bread. Halach ma'anya, we're going to say in a few minutes, right? This is the bread of poor people, right? So we say Chag hamatzos. On the one hand, it's the celebration of our remembrance of the tsaros that we had, right? Chag hamatzos, but even the word matzah has a lashon like matzah umeriva. It's a lashon in Tanakh of fighting and clashing. Matzah has a harsh sort of what's the word, a connotation to it, because the idea of matzah is a reflection of the difficulty that we had, right? Mitzad Sheni. It's also Zman Cheruseinu, right? It's also the time where we recognize our incredible elevation and our freedom, and the fact that Hashem took us out from that terrible existence and terrible suffering and disconnect from Kedusha and all of that, and brought us to where we are today and what we need today and what we have. Yeah. Mikra Kodesh. Do you need the water? Okay. Mikra Kodesh. Do you need the water? Well, there's bottles in my office. If you want to, yeah, bottle of water. Yeah. This is maybe a bad place to set up in front of all of the stuff that's here. I guess it's where should I move over there? Okay, we'll see you next time somebody needs anything. We'll move over. Okay. Chagamatsu says, "Zman Cheruseinu Mikra Kodesh." Mikra Kodesh, that means that it's a holy time. Any time that Hashem decrees these special times of the year to commemorate events or to elevate us in particular ways. So this is it's a Mikra Kodesh. It's a happening of holiness. Right? We're entering into, it's all of these things are a part of these days. It's not just a remembrance of the difficulty. It's not just a remembrance of the salvation, right? But as a part of all of that, it's now a sanctified time. It's also a holy time, a special time where we meet together with Hashem. That's the concept of a moed. Mikra Kodesh, and all of this is Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? All of what we're saying, all of these ideas, all the concepts that we are incorporating into this Yantif, which we're mentioning in Kiddush, right? All of that is in an effort to make the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim indelible in our consciousness, in our minds, right? And this is by every Kiddush we say this idea, Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. this idea that even Kiddush on Shabbos, we say Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? And that's would sound strange. Why should Shabbos be Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim if Shabbos is commemorating Brias HaOlam, right? Which was Hashem creating the world. It was before there were even Jews, before there was Mitzrayim, before there was anything, right? Why should we say that Shabbos is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim? Right? It doesn't, right? So it's a very interesting idea that without Yetzias Mitzrayim, Shabbos would not, the Brias HaOlam would not have its same meaning. Why? Because there's many people today who believe that there was a Brias HaOlam. There's many people today who believe the world began and started right from nothing. Right? That's what most people believe today, right? But they don't believe in Hashgacha. They don't believe Hashem is running the world. They don't believe that Hashem makes everything happen and can change anything whenever He wants, and that He, right? They don't believe that. So you can have people who believe in a Bria, but not believing in Hashgacha, and that doesn't help, right? That's not what we need to believe. So even Shabbos is given its full import by Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? The fact that Brias HaOlam was not a one-time event and something that happened way back when, right? But this is like the Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo describes this, in great eloquence, and that the whole concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim was explaining to us and the world that there is a master of the universe. There's somebody running the show. There's somebody making everything happen, and somebody who, anytime he wants to, intercedes and changes things and does things the way that he wants. And that's why the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim is so central. And that's why even on Shabbos, where we're commemorating Brias HaOlam, we're commemorating something that was way, way, way before Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim because it's Yetzias Mitzrayim that like puts the stamp on Brias HaOlam, right? The fact that He took us out of Mitzrayim showed us that since Brias HaOlam and until today, until Tafshin Pei Aleph, right? It's still the same one running the world and making everything happening and right controlling the world. So right, this concept of Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim is ubiquitous, right? That word means it's like everywhere. It's comes up everywhere and it applies to everything because Yetzias Mitzrayim is so fundamental to our emunah, and that's why the concept is so important. That's why we have to be remember Yetzias Mitzrayim every single day, twice a day, and that's why we have the Untitled Pesach with this special mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim once a year. That comes up because this is like the cornerstone of our emunah in Hashgachas Hashem. Okay, Kivonu v'charta, you chose us, Hashem, v'osanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, and you elevated us, you sanctified us, you made us holy. U'moadei kodshecha, and your convocations, right? A moed is like a meeting place, a gathering, right, where we come and we meet with Hashem. Moadei kodshecha b'simcha u'v'sason hinchaltanu. Right, with great joy and rejoicing, you gave them to us. Baruch atah Hashem, Kadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Okay, so this again in a year where it would be Shabbos, you would say Kadesh HaShabbos Yisrael v'hazmanim. Right, and that's also just an important idea to understand in halacha. Anytime you have Yontif and Shabbos together, so the bracha changes, right? If it's just Shabbos, you say Mekadesh HaShabbos, right? Like in Shmona Esrei. If it's Yontif, you say Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, right? But if it's Shabbos and Yontif together, you say Mekadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'hazmanim, right? And the Gemara discusses this. Why don't we keep the order consistent? Why don't we say Mekadesh either HaShabbos v'hazmanim or Mekadesh Yisrael v'HaShabbos v'hazmanim, right? Why do we break it up with HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'hazmanim, right? Like why is Yisrael being, right? Here, either we're blessing Shabbos or we're blessing the Zmanim, but why does, right? So the Gemara says, very interesting idea, right? Because Shabbos happens without us, right? Shabbos is every 7 days, it's Shabbos, right? Whether we're here to see it or not, whether the Jews are, Chalila not keeping Shabbos or they are, no matter what's happening, no matter where, if there's a Beis Din, no Beis Din, Shabbos is every 7th day. There's just that's a cycle that never stops. However, the Zmanim, the Moadim, are all dependent only on Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh determines when the Moadim are, right? And Rosh Chodesh is only determined by Yisrael, right? If there is no Beis Din, then there's no Rosh Chodesh, right? The only reason that we still have Rosh Chodesh is because they were Makadesh the Chodesh in advance, right? Hundreds of years ago, when they set up the calendar, to last until the year 6000. So every month until the year 6000 is Kadesh, every Rosh Chodesh, and that's why we have a cycle of a calendar, right? But in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, if Beis Din would not have made Rosh Chodesh until the day later or 2 days later, whatever it would be, so that would make it into Rosh Chodesh, right? So we say Mekadesh HaShabbos because Shabbos is Kedusha is completely independent of us. But we say always Yisrael v'Hazmanim because the Zmanim, the Kedusha of the Zmanim is only because of us, because of Klal Yisrael. Right? That's what the Gemara says. That's always in Shemona Esrei. And any of the times that we make the brachos, we put it in that order for that reason. Okay, now this year we've gotten through Yayin and Kiddush, right? Yak, Yayin, Kiddush. So now we've got Ner, right, which is bracha of Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh. So that's what we say right now. Bracha of Shem Elokeinu Melech Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh. Okay, just an interesting idea. I want to hear about this bracha. Why is it written in plural? Right, Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh instead of like Borei Or Ha'esh. Or Ha'esh, right? We see the light of the fire. What does it mean, the lights of the fire? So I saw once, it's a nice idea about this, that we know now that the light is made up of all different colors, and each color is like sort of like a different light, right? It's a different wavelength of light that is shining out from something. So we could see in black and white just the same as we could see in color, right? But seeing in color is so much more enjoyable, so much more beautiful, so much more pleasurable, right? To experience the world in color. So we're giving a bracha to Hashem on Me'orei Ha'esh, that even just when you light a fire, from the light of one fire, you're able to see a whole variety of colors, right? It's not just that like one light is given out. There's all different lights that are good. All right. I'm sure there's many, many different ways you can, play with that bracha in your mind and come up with different, understandings of Orei. Okay, anyway, then we go on and now we're going through Havdalah, right? Yakna Ha. We're up to Havdalah. So we say Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Hamavdil Bein Kodesh L'Chol. Right, under normal circumstances, in a regular week, Hashem is Mavdil Bein Kodesh L'Chol. This week we'll see it's Bein Or L'Choshech, from light to dark. Bein Yisrael La'amim, from Klal Yisrael to the other nations. Bein Yom HaShevi'i L'Sheshes Yemei HaMaaseh, and from Shabbos to the other days of the week. But now we have to mention a special type of Havdalah, right? Because all of those don't cover the type of Havdalah that we're doing now, because we're going from one type of holiness, not to Chol, but to another type of holiness. Now, granted, it's lower, which is why we do Havdalah. Like we mentioned, we don't do Havdalah in the other direction, right? When it's Yantif, Matzah Yantif that goes into Shabbos, right? Let's say you can have that. Let's say Shavuos can come out on Matzah Shabbos. So we don't do Havdalah from Yantif to go into Shabbos. Why not? Because we're going up in Kedusha. We make Kiddush to separate the Kiddush, the holiness, right? Kiddush is what shows us that we are in a higher level of Kiddush than we were before. Havdalah is only to separate from a higher level that we were at to a lower level that we're going to, right? So on Motzei Shabbos, normally that's going from Kodesh all the way down to Chol, right? But here we're going to be going Mekodesh LeKodesh, right? We're going from one level of Kedusha of Shabbos to the Kedusha of Yantif, which is lower, but it's still Kedusha. So that's why I say, V'hivdalta, V'kidashta, I'm sorry, I skipped it, Bein Kedusha Shabbos, Kedusha Yom Tov V'hivdalta. Hashem, you made a separation between the different types of Kedusha that we can experience over here, right? There's a Kedusha of Shabbos and there's a Kedusha of Yantif. There's Yom HaShvi, M'sheshes Ma'aseh Kidashta. And you elevated Shabbos from the other days, so that even when those other days carry a Yantif with them, they're still lower than Shabbos. And likewise, Hashem, you have separated us and sanctified us with your holiness. And then we say the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Hamavdil Ben Kodesh Le Kodesh. Okay, so that's the Havdalah aspect of the Yayin Kiddush Ner Havdalah. And now we're up to Zman, which is the bracha of Shehechianu. So we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Shehechianu, that you've kept us alive, V'kiyamanu, and you have kept us going, V'higianu, and we have reached Lazman Hazeh to this time, right? So this is a bracha that we make, at all of the Yom Tovim, because it's a special time, and we're thanking Hashem that we've had the zchus to reach this time, and we know that we make this bracha as well when we have a happy occurrence. a happy event, or you get something new that you're very excited and happy about, right? So we make this bracha of V'Shechianu. That's a recognition of the Zman that Hashem has been kind to us in allowing us to reach this Zman that we are at with this thing. Okay, and thus we finish Yakna Haz, right? We finish the whole thing. Then we drink the wine. If you stand for Kiddush, so then obviously at this point you sit down. If you sit for Kiddush, so then you remain seated. However, what you have to remember to do is lean, right? This is when we do Haseba. Many people have the minhag to either use an armchair with a pillow or to like turn their chair a little bit sideways to make it more comfortable, but you're supposed to comfortably try to lean to the side. When it comes to women, there's a very big machlokes going back, hundreds of years to the times of the Rishonim, whether women are supposed to lean and whether the halachos apply to women or not. Nowadays, I think most people do. Ashkenazim anyway, is that correct? Most Ashkenazim here do Haseba when you have a Seder. Most women lean. Whatever, you should do whatever your minhag is. If you don't know what your minhag is, then you should lean. But if your minhag is that you don't do Hasebas, then you don't. However, for men, I guess for women who, if this is what they do always, they should be careful to do it. But if a person forgets to do Hasebas, then they have to drink the cup again, right? It's a mitzvah of the night. This is all midrabanan, but that's what the mitzvah is. The drinking of the kos, of the daled kos, is a mitzvah midrabanan, but it must be done Haseba. It must be done in that fashion of leaning over to the side. If it is not, if a person drinks the cup and they forget to do Hasebas, they have to drink the cup again. They don't make the bracha again. They don't say the whole bracha again because the bracha worked, but they didn't drink the cup properly. The cup has to be drank. The Haseba. Okay, that has to be okay. And you have to drink also rov kos. You have to drink most of the cup. Normally, when it comes to Kiddush, you only have to drink a cheekful, right? Or, but when it comes to Leil Seder, you have to drink most of the cup. So there's something that you have to be aware. The cup itself has to be at least a revius, which should be around 5.5 ounces. Let's say that's being machmir, 5.5 ounces. If it's over 4.5, let's say, you could be lenient and use it, but it really the chatchila should be 5.5 ounces, the cup at least. And when it comes to the Seder, you have to drink rov kos. You can't just take a sip or a few sips. You have to drink the majority of the cup. So if you're the type of person that doesn't like grape juice, or if the sugar is bad for you, or it gives you headaches or whatever, just be careful and try to make sure that you get a cup that's like exactly the right size, so that you're not forcing yourself to drink extra, grape juice or wine. If you have like a very big cup that some people might have, like a big Kiddush cup, so then you have to drink most of that Kiddush cup, and that's part of the mitzvah. Okay, so that's kadesh, and we're up to urchatz. Okay, so urchatz is the mitzvah of washing al davar hatibul v'mashke. And this is something that's a halacha. It really has nothing to do with Pesach whatsoever. This is a halacha that some people do zmanenu anyway. And that is as follows: just like we wash for bread, right? Why do we wash for bread? It's a zeicher to the Beis Hamikdash. It's a zeicher to the times of the Beis Hamikdash that the Kohanim had to eat their truma b'tahara. They had to eat their food in a state of purity. And because we don't want that halacha to ever be forgotten, all of Klal Yisrael washes on bread, right? It's a really interesting gezeira, but it's really like a gezeira that's basically zeicher l'churban, that we wash on bread, and this is a halacha. A person has to do it. If you don't have access to water, you have to travel in order to get water to do it. Only under extreme circumstances, when you can't have water and you have to eat the bread, so then you're allowed to eat it without touching it. But I don't know if I've ever done that in my life, frankly. It's not something you should really ever be somech on unless you really have to, right? But that's the halacha when it comes to bread. However, in Shulchan Aruch, right in that same section, right, a siman right before it, there's a halacha also about washing on a davar shetibula b'mashke. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, a fruit or a vegetable or any type of food that got wet with one of the 7 liquids. There are 7 things that are considered liquid in the Torah. Does anybody know what these are? Yad, shachat, dam. Anybody? That's the acronym. Yad is yayin, dalet is dam, shin is shemen, oil, chet is chalav, milk, tet is tal. Thank you, very good. Thank you. Who said that? Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Tal is dew, dalet is dvash, and mem is mayim, water. Right. So those are the 7 liquids in the Torah. Something else that's a liquid is not halachically a liquid, right? Like let's say, liquid mercury or something like that doesn't have the halachic status of a liquid. These are the 7 things that are liquids in the Torah. And the halacha is, without getting into the details, but when a fruit or vegetable or another food comes in contact with a liquid, so at that point, it is susceptible to tumah. It is susceptible to be makabel tumah at that point, meaning if you have an apple or something and it is on the tree and a dead person touches it, it doesn't affect it. And even if it falls off the tree and something tameh touches it, it won't affect it until it gets wet, right? But once it's wet, then from that point onward, it is able to get tumah. Okay, this is all complicated halachos of tumah and tahara. However, as a result, there are those who hold that even nowadays, just like when it comes to bread, that we have to wash in order to commemorate those halachos of Kohanim eating b'tahara. So too, something that is now wet with one of these liquids, because in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, that wet thing would be susceptible to tumah. We don't want to forget that. We want to remember that things that get wet are, able to be makabel tumah. So we have to wash on those things also. Okay, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and there's 2 opinions already in the Shulchan Aruch that says whether you have to do this or not. And therefore, most people don't do this. Certainly outside of the Haredi world, I don't know really anybody who does this, in terms of washing on fruits and vegetables. And what that means is that you have an apple and you wash it off, and now it's got drops of water on it. So before you eat the apple, you have to dry your hands and wash without a bracha, right? You have to wash, twice on each hand as if you're washing for bread, right? And then you eat the apple like that. So what I do personally when I can, I don't wash. However, I try to dry it off. If it's dry, then you don't have to wash it. That's halach. If it's dry, then you don't have to wash for it. So usually when you're washing for a fruit, if you have to dry to wash your hands anyway to eat the fruit, you may as well just dry the fruit. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, but I'm not knocking on this. I'm saying, like, if I'm at somebody's house and they're serving grapes, or even if there's grapes at my house and I see they were rinsed off and they're wet. So personally, this is not something that I do. And the times that I was machmir on and off, etc. There certainly are people who do, but this is the halacha. However, when it comes to Leil Seder, everybody does this. That's what all of this is about. In other words, this halacha of washing for davar sh'tula b'mashke, something that is dipped in water, something that is touched liquid, is nothing to do with Pesach or Leil Seder. This is a halacha that applies all year round. And like I said, some people do it and some people don't. However, on the Leil Seder, we do it. Leil Seder, we do it when it comes to karpas. And why do we do it? The Gemara says, so the kids will ask why. That's right. It's like something to keep the kids asking, like, hey, what are we doing here? What's going on? And then you'll answer them and you'll tell them this whole halacha about Zeichel Churban, and this whole night is Zeichel Churban because we're remembering the Korban Pesach, right? It's just a way to keep people engaged. So now you'll have what to answer when somebody asks you, what are we doing and why are we doing this only tonight when we don't do it any other time? Okay. So then that is urchatz, and we wash without a bracha. That's important to try to remember to do, because sometimes we sort of are on autopilot, and when we get to the sink and the cup is in our hand, we just load up the program of washing and we one, two, right? We just kind of get into that mode. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it's better than a mode not doing those things. But tonight, try to remember not to wash. We always remember to remind each other. We try not to wash, not to break, not to make a bracha. I'm sorry, we don't make a bracha on this washing. That's what we do. But the washing should be exactly the same as when you wash for bread, which is, by the way, just to make sure that we all know, when you wash for bread, the halacha is it has to go all the way to your wrists, and it has to cover all of the surfaces, front and back, in between the fingers, etc. This is something that, like, I don't know. I used to notice this. Specifically, let's say on the Poland trips, watching people washing on Shabbos and stuff like that. A lot of people like times will just like pour water on their hands, and this whole section of their hand doesn't get wet at all. It's like dry, you know what I mean? Because you have to move your hand a little bit in order to get the water to go around. So this is my what's the word? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Not shout out, not like when you say something to remind people of something, and my what? PSA. That's not what I would have said, but yeah, this is my PSA. Thank you. That's not what I was looking for. That is good. That I try to tell people this whenever I have the opportunity to. When you're washing, just please try to remember to make sure that your fingers should be loose, right? So that your fingers are allowing the water to get between them, and you really have to move your hand a little bit like this. Like, I try to tell my kids this at home without being too annoying about it, but you really have to try to make sure, especially this part of the hand is the most susceptible to remaining dry, because it's just like when you pour water like this, the water goes almost everywhere but not there. So you have to, okay, just make sure. But anyway, that again, that has nothing to do with washing for vegetables. That's anytime you wash your hands up to your wrist, and it has to be all over, all around. Okay, then we go to karpas. Karpas, we are eating now to remember, again, the tears. We're going to take this karpas and dip it in salt water. Salt water is something you really should prepare before Shabbos. You're not supposed to make salt water on Shabbos or Yontif as a gezerah, that you're not supposed to pickle things on Shabbos or Yontif. So you really are supposed to prepare the salt water from before Shabbos. Okay, just to remember for this year. And you eat any adama, any vegetable. Some people have the minhag to eat celery. Some people have potatoes. In Elizabeth, New Jersey, where I grew up, the Rav Pinchas Mordechai Taitz, Zichrono Livracha, used to use bananas in order to make sure that people knew that bananas were hadama. Right? People used to not know that halacha, so he made it his minhag to use bananas for karpa, so that everybody would hear that the Rav used bananas for karpa, so everybody would know that bananas are hadama. Isn't that interesting? That's what he did, but that's fine. You could use any vegetable as hadama. However, you dip it in the salt water to remind us of the tears, right, of the tears of Klal Yisrael's suffering, and the right, because karpas is samech perach, right, shishim ribu of perach, that we had that terrible suffering, the 600,000 people suffered karpas, and you should eat less than a kazayas of it. You should just take a small bite of it, less than a kazayas, and the reason for that is because we want the adama that you're making on it, we want that bracha to work on the maror that you're going to be eating later. Okay, why? This is because maror is not a food that you normally just like eat in the meal like that. Right? The halacha is if you eat a food that is not normally eaten in a meal, you have to make your own bracha on it. For example, let's say you go somewhere and after hamotzi, they clear off the plates, and forever everybody gets a banana. That's their whatever, their second course, everybody gets bananas. You'd have to make a hadam on that banana. That's not a normal food that you get in the course of a meal, right? So it's really the same thing, like a big piece of lettuce like that. That's not even though you eat lettuce in a salad, right? But you don't usually just take a huge piece of lettuce and munch on it like a rabbit, right? So that lettuce is really something you should make a hadama on its own, right? So in order to cover that hadama, but we don't make a bracha on it because maybe it's not part of the meal, and so. But the poskim say we should make a hadama on the karpas, having in mind that hadama should stretch and work all the way for the maror later, right? However, if we eat more than a kazayas of the karpas, right? If we eat a few bites of the karpas, kids could do this. That's fine. My kids always like to eat more, and it's fine. I don't tell them. But for a person who is going to be eating the maror, and you eat a few bites of karpas, and at that point you really should make a bracha acharona, right? Because it's going to be a while until you get to the maror, and you're probably going to be hungry again, and the karpas will already not be so much, you're not going to remember that you ate that karpas, so you're going to lose your bracha acharona on the karpas. You hear what I'm saying? The bracha rishona lasts, right? If I make a bracha rishona here on a coffee, and I sit here all day and having meetings and learning and talking and having meetings, and I'm here now at 5 p.m. and I want to have another cup of coffee, I don't make another bracha, right? My bracha rishona lasts the whole day unless I do a shinui makom, right? If I leave or something, or if I make a bracha acharona, right? But a bracha rishona lasts forever. There's no such thing as a shiur equal, the timer running out, that's only on a bracha acharona, because a bracha acharona is thanking Hashem for what I ate already. If I don't anymore feel like I ate anything, I can't thank Hashem for that anymore, right? So a bracha acharona times out after 72 minutes, or after 72 minutes and a person is hungry, right? But a bracha rishona never times out. Okay, that's just right. Stam halacha to know. Another PSA, thank you. Right, so over here, when you make that hadama, even if you're at like some crazy long seder and they're going to say magid for 2 hours, it'll still work on the maror later, unless you did a shinui makom, right? You left or came back or something like that, but that's not, normally what happens. Okay, so you make a hadama, you eat less than a kazayas. We do not do heseba for karpas. Some people do, but most people do not do heseba for karpas. You eat sitting up, you don't lean over to the side, okay? And you should try to not have a full thing. Oh, this has all of the instructions along the way. This is nice little, okay, very nice. Okay, Yachatz. We're finished with karpas. We're up to yachatz. Yachatz is when we break the middle matzah, and we are going to take the bigger piece of that matzah, and we're going to hide that away for the afikomen, and the smaller piece of the matzah we're going to return to the matzah tray. Now, just to explain, the matzah tray has 3 matzahs in it. This should be also set up from before. When you start the Seder, there's the top matzah, the middle matzah, and the lower matzah, right? Is a Kneged Kohen Levi Yisrael, or Chesed, Gura, and Tiferes, or all sorts of things. But you've got the top matzah, the middle matzah, and the lower matzah. Okay, what we're going to do when we get the hamotzi, and I'll explain as far as like making the brachos, and we're going to make the bracha first on all of them, and then we're going to drop one and make another bracha. We'll explain all of that when we get there, right? But when it comes to yachatz, we're going to take out that middle matzah, and the middle matzah is going to be separated, right? Part of it is going to be put back in that we're going to make the brachos on later, and the other half of it we're going to hide away for the afikomen. Right, and this is also, we have a lot of families have the minute to either hide the afikomen or the kids hide the afikomen or something like that. And of course, that's also just to keep the kids engaged and interested and involved, and anything that we can do to keep the kids happy and involved. That's what we try to do. Okay, we'll talk about the makos and all different things. Whatever, anything. It's really more about the kids. The Seder is really supposed to be focused on the kids and getting the kids involved. Okay, but that's yachatz, and that's it. There's nothing to say at yachatz. It's all just a mime act, and anything that there is to know about yachatz, or you have to ask and answer. But there's no speech as part of yachatz. You just take out the matzah, you break it, and put the big piece back. Okay, now we are entering Magid. Okay, now it's just important to remember that Magid, this part is one of the only mitzvahs min haTorah that we have, right? Like we said, we have matzahs and mitzvah midaraisa, kiddush, and Magid, right? This part of the Hagadah now is like, one of the only mitzvahs midaraisa of the night. And it's important that we try to do it and do it the proper way. So what Magid is the mitzvah of Hagadah Telebincha, the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, and it's a mitzvah that everybody has to do, even if they don't have children, even if they are alone and just by themselves. Everybody has the mitzvah to tell over the story, and not just to tell over the story, but to tell it over in a certain way with questions and answers. It has to be told over in this engaging way, right? It has to be a sipur, a story that's being told. It can't just be that, like, okay, we were in Egypt and it was really tough and we got out. Right? There's a whole, like a Seder, a way in which the questions and answers and the story has to be told, and that's why Chazal set it up for us with the formula of Magid. So I always say this is very important to remember, especially I think in a year like this, where all the preparations for the Seder can only start on Motzei Shabbos. So a lot of times there are women that will go out for bits and pieces of Magid to like go into the kitchen to like put the soup on, or to to do something. I'm talking about? Does anybody like see what I mean? So it's just important. That's fine if you need to do that, that you could do it, but you just have to make sure that any parts that you miss, you're saying to yourself. Right? Either you're reading it before, or you're reading it afterwards, or you're reading it ahead, etc. But every person has a mitzvah to read the whole Hagadah. And again, like Kiddush and like so many other things, you could be Yotzei the mitzvah with what? Shomea ke'oneh, right? If you're at my Seder and I'm reading the Hagadah and you're paying attention and you're being Yotzei with me and I'm having mine, so then that's fine. That's as if you're reading it, right? But every person has the mitzvah to read it. So if you're going to be stepping out for a part of the time where the Hagadah is being read, so those pieces you have to read on your own. You have to make sure that you read it. In addition, you really should understand what you're reading, right? You're Yotzei. If you're not, you're Yotzei just because you've said the formula. You know what I mean? You're saying the formula that Chazal put out there, so you're going to be Yotzei, just like you're Yotzei Megillah by reading it in Hebrew, even if you don't know what you're saying. However, as far as the mitzvah of being Makayim the mitzvah in a more real way, in a deeper way, you should for sure know what you're saying, and it's definitely preferable to read it in English than to Hebrew. You know what I mean? If you'll understand it in English, you can read it in English, and that's totally acceptable. Like at our Seder, a lot of times over the years when we've had different people over, Baalei Tshuva or people that don't read Hebrew so well, so we would let them we would go around the table and read, and they would read in English. So while they're reading English, I would read along in Hebrew quietly, but I wouldn't tell other people at the Seder to do that. I said, if other people were listening to them in English and understood what they were saying, so you're yotzei in English. You know what I mean? It's not like like a tefillah, even tefillahs could be yotzei, but it's harder because you don't know exactly what the words mean. But over here, the translations that are made are very accurate. So it's more important to know what you're saying than to just read it through, right? But even if you just read it through, you'll be yotzei. But you do have to remember, again, if you're stepping out for any period of time to make up those bits. Okay, should we go on, or should we stop here and pick it up next time from the beginning of Magid, or should we continue a little bit? Keep going? Okay, good. Okay, so what do you say? Keep going. Yeah, we're gonna go on. Okay, so this is the beginning of Magid. So we uncover the matzahs, right? Throughout the night, this is just something to keep in mind. Throughout the night, there's a number of times that we are going to cover the matzahs or uncover the matzahs. So basically how it works is as follows, and you'll follow along the Hagadah. I highly, highly recommend for anybody who is not familiar with how to go through the Hagadah to get any art scroll Hagadah, any of the art scroll Hagadahs, from the children's Hagadahs to the complicated adult, but any art scroll Hagadah has got great instructions along the way. And I highly recommend that people do like what we're doing now, which is go through the Hagadah in advance so that you kind of know what to expect and you know what's coming, and you're not just, oh, right, wow, it's just better and you feel more a part of it. I try to do this every year, to go through the Hagadah a bit in advance and go over it either in classes or shiurim and things like that. So I was happy to have the opportunity again to do it this year. So one thing that we're going to do over the Hagadah periodically is call attention to different things that are on the table. So we know that it's not nice to call attention to the wine when the matzahs are there, right? So anytime we're going to be dealing with the wine or the grape juice or a kos or lifting up a kos or singing or making a kiddush or a bracha, we're going to cover the matzahs, right? However, there's going to be a bunch of times that we're going to be addressing the matzah, right? And at those times, we're going to be not dealing with the kos, and we're going to uncover the matzah and address the matzah. But the main idea is just to try to remember, that the matzahs should be uncovered for the parts that they are sort of being addressed, and that they should make sure to be covered for any of the parts that are dealing with the grape juice and the wine. Right? But sometimes it happens in the Hagadah, someone is, oh, we forgot we're supposed to cover it. It's not a big deal. You don't have to go back and do anything over. It's just to try to pay attention along the way to what you do. And when it says cover or uncover, so there's different things. We have a Seder plate that has kind of curtains. So I'll open up the curtains a little bit, but there will also be a plate of matzahs in the middle of the table, and that there'll be a cloth over that, and that will actually cover and uncover throughout the meal, throughout the magid. Okay, so right now our kos is still empty. Right? We drank our first kos, the cup is still empty. So we're going to now uncover the matzahs, and somebody can hold up the ka'ara with the matzahs on it. We don't do that physically, but somebody does that. They pick up the matzahs. And we say as follows, okay? Now this is the beginning of Magid. Halach ma'anya. This is the bread of our poverty. The achlu av hasana, that our fathers ate ba'ara de Mitzrayim, and the land of Egypt. Okay, so this is in Aramaic. It's the only piece of the Hagadah that's in Aramaic. And this is like a call to any of the poor people now, anybody who's out there that doesn't have a place to eat. So we want to make sure that everybody is able to participate in the Seder. Everybody is able to have matzah and wine and the Korban Pesach and the times of the Beis Mikdash. So everybody, kol dichvin, yesei v'yechol. Anybody who is an ani, anybody who is poor, come and eat. Kol deitzrich, anybody who is in need, yesei v'yifsach, come and make Pesach with us. Okay, so this is an invitation, again, to make sure. Everyone was kind of joking about this last year, that no one's going to say this last year when everyone was afraid of COVID at the beginning. Nobody knew what anybody coming, right? Okay. Hashta hacha, now we are here, meaning in Galus. L'shana haba ba'ara di Yisrael. Next year, we're going to be in Israel, meaning in the Geula of Israel. Hashta Avde. This year, unfortunately, we are still avadim. We're still in a state of servitude. We are not free to serve Hashem in every which way, and we're still at the whims of the Goyim. The Shana Haba b'nei Chorin. And Hashem, next year we should be true free men. Okay, we put the kara back down, we cover the matzah, and now we pour the second cup. Okay, again, the second cup is going to be like the kos of Magid. At the end of Magid, we're going to raise up the cup and make a bracha on it. But starting from right now, the cup is supposed to be filled so that it's like present through the whole Seder of Magid. Okay, so we fill the cup now, cover the matzah, fill the cup, and then we have the Ma Nishtana. So this is the 4 questions. And again, even though it's like cute and it's a song, and this is something that every child knows, mamish like from one of the first Torah childhood songs that are taught to kids. This is mamish in the Mishnah. This is a part of the Hagadah. It's a part that everybody needs to say. And it's also just important to realize if there's kids who are saying it or singing it, so you're not really yotze with a kid saying it, so you should just make sure to say the words along to yourself as well. It's part of the Hagadah, right? So these questions are like the questions that are setting us up to tell the whole story of, why are we doing all of these things. So the Hagadah, the Mishnah now, the Manishtana is going to lay out for us all the questions, all the things that are different about Pesach night. And through the course of the Hagadah, we're going to answer all of these questions. Okay. First, so first is just the general question: why is this night so different from all the other nights? On all regular nights of the year, we eat whatever we want. We eat chametz, we eat matzah. Halayla hazeh kula matzah. Tonight, only matzah. What's up with that? Number 2, regular nights, we eat whatever vegetables we want. We have salad, we have whatever. Yeah, halayla hazeh maror. But tonight, everybody's eating maror, which is not the normal thing that we eat. Like we said before, you don't usually just take a big leaf and just eat it in the middle of the meal. That's not a normal thing to do. So why are we doing that? On a regular night, we don't dip vegetables in food in like dips ever. It's not what we do. But tonight we're going to do it twice, right? We did karpas, and we're also going to be dipping the maror into the charoses, which we're going to talk about later, right? Why we do that, etc. But that's also something that's unusual. We don't usually do that. So why are we doing that different tonight than all other nights? And finally, on a regular night, we all know that we can eat or recline when we are eating. I'm sorry, sit or recline, right? We could chill out like this, sit up straight, right? However you want to be. But tonight, tonight, everybody is only leaning, and right, nobody is just sitting regular. So why is that the case? Okay, so we have these 4 questions that are all asking why we do things strangely and different on this night. Like I said, the whole Hagadah, starting from right now, is coming to answer. And if you look at the questions, right, each one, let's just look, it's dealing with matzah, maror, right, the dipping, and the mesubim. So if you think about it, it looks like 2 of them are the saros, right, matzah and the maror. Those are both questions asking, why do we remember the sad? What's sad about tonight? Why are we having matzah, which is like this lechem oni? Why are we having maror, which is bitter and upsetting, right? And then at the same time, and that's different, right? Normally we don't have these like mourning or whatever negative types of foods. And at the same time, we're doing extremes on the other way. We're dipping our foods in different sauces, and we're eating in a reclined fashion, right? These are both expressions of freedom and wealth and extravagance, and so the kids are all confused by. It's not just that it's different from the other nights that don't make sense with each other, right? And that's really what the whole theme is, like we saw from Kiddush at the very, very beginning, right? Chag hamatzos zman cherusenu, right? That's mamish the theme. The whole night is this dichotomy of remembering the tzaros and the yeshuos at the same time, right? That's all part of it. Okay, so at this point, we're going to we open up the matzahs, and now basically almost until the end, the matzahs are going to be open with a few exceptions, like a few times that we're going to raise up our kos. Let's say by the Hisha Amda, at a couple of other places we're going to deal with the kos. We're going to cover up the matzahs, but for the most part now the matzahs are going to be open. And they're going to be a part of the story. Okay, so we start with Avadim Ayinu Leparu b'Mitzrayim. So we're answering the kids. I'm going to tell you, why do we do all of these things differently tonight? Why do we do all of these extreme differences, extreme on the one end of remembering the sadness, and extreme on the other end of remembering, of celebrating our freedom, because we were slaves. And Hashem took us out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And if Hashem would not have taken us out from there, right, this is one of the most powerful lines in the Hagadah, if you ask me, because it's hard to really put this in perspective, right? But he's saying this is for us to say. This is not historical, right? If not for this thing of Yetzias Mitzrayim, right, Klal Yisrael would still be a subordinate nation to Mitzrayim, right? And just think about that historically. As much as any two nations could live and exist through time with one picture, let's say like the hundreds of years of the slave trade, or hundreds of years of people being treated as slaves and being treated as different, and that was just like accepted and acceptable in the world, and that's how it was, right? So if not for Hashem having taken us out of Mitzrayim, so until today, Klal Yisrael would have been like this subordinate nation, and we wouldn't have had our own place in the world and our own expression. It was only because Hashem took us out from that. It's really hard to relate to that, right? Hard, especially today. It's such a free world, and maybe only nowadays, like the emancipation movement would have hit Egypt, and they would have been pressured to let the Jews go or something. They probably would have figured out a way to blame us. Probably would have figured out a way to everyone else should go free except for us, right? But can you imagine such a thing? I mean, but it's like amazing. But you could see there's only until modern. I mean, there's still slavery in some parts of the world today, right? But it's only really until modern times that slavery was like completely taken out of the world. And different people say different answers. It means that hashkafically, Klal Yisrael would never have developed, into a holy nation. We would have just remained. All of those things are true. Okay. Nafilu kulanu chachamim, and even if we're all very wise, kulanu nevonim, we're all deeply understand things. Kulanu zakenim, we're all elders, right? We're like great Talmidei Chachamim. Kulanu yodim es haTorah. Even if we all know the whole Hagadah Bal Peh, right? A person who knows the Hagadah, they've been saying it for 70 years and teaching it, and hundreds of times they've said it over, they know the whole thing backwards and forwards. Mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim. It doesn't matter. It's still a mitzvah to say it. It's not the point. It's not the point that we know it already. The point is that we have to go over it and be machazik it and tell the story and experience it. This is also an important line. This applies the whole night, right? The whole time, at the meal, after the meal, the next day, right? The whole Pesach, we're supposed to be talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're supposed to be talking about this incredible event that changed us and affected us. We're supposed to, this is the time of year that we're supposed to be reading about it, thinking about it, talking about it. So I highly recommend this week, especially in any of your downtime, there's all these great books. Let My Nation Go. Does anybody have that over here? We have it, I'm sure, somewhere. Let My Nation Go. It's like that. It's like written like a novel almost, but like the story of Klal Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim. And there's all sorts of really tons of good Haggadahs downstairs in English and all sorts of languages. Like really, the more that you're able to enrich yourself with information before Purim, the more you're going to Pesach, before the Seder, the more you're going to get out of it. Okay, now we are starting to go through the drashos of the Haggadah itself. Should we stop now? We'll do a little bit more, I'll do a little bit more, and then we'll stop, a little bit more. Okay. So now this is where all of the different drashos start to come in. The Mishnah, the Haggadah, which is a Mishnah, now comes and tells us many different amarim about what happened in Mitzrayim. And it starts with a story of how the Tanaim kept the Seder. Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. So, of course, there's tons and tons of Torah just about this. Like, why were these people the ones who were there? What were they doing over there in Bnei Brak? Many different Perushim. Like I said, I really encourage you to look and see. According to some, they were there planning the Bar Kokhba revolt. That's what the Meir Kahana, that's what he says. They were there in Bnei Brak planning the revolt. Shahayu Mesubim b'Bnei Brak. They were over there in Bnei Brak. And all night of the Seder, right? They got together for the Seder, and then like they finished the Seder, and they just kept on talking and kept on telling stories and kept on sharing midrashim and kept on, sharing insights. They went all the way through the night until Zman Kriya Shema, until the time of Shema came. Okay, so again, there's many, many different perushim about this. It's like a metaphor. Kol Osa Laila means the whole time of the Galus until the time of the Geula, which is like the daybreak, and it was time to say Shema, to declare Yichud Hashem. There's tons, like I said, tons and tons to see in all of this. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who again, he was one of the people who was there. Hare ani kiven shivim shana. Here I am, and I'm almost like 70 years old. Okay, now this is just an interesting Chazal, very famous story in Chazal. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the youngest person ever to be appointed the head of the Sanhedrin. Okay, it was a whole big tumult. I don't remember all the details, but there was a very big tumult, very big like a controversy about who should be appointed the next head of the Sanhedrin. And there were a number of people that were considered to be very, very worthy, but had various issues with their lineage or issues with their history, etc., and that they couldn't become the head of the Sanhedrin. And they settled on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, but he was a teenager. He was 18 years old, which is like extraordinarily young. And he felt that it would be difficult for people to respect him. And he went to sleep, and he woke up the next morning gray. Right, Hashem gave him gray hair basically overnight, as like to give him the ability to project as an older person. You need the water? You go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. I'll come back.
Go ahead. You're off camera.
Okay, I'll say.
You're already off camera. Yeah. So Hashem gave him the ability to look like an older person in order to get the kavod and and respect from the people. So that's why he's saying here, Hare ani kiven shivim shana. He was a youngster. But he said, here I am, like I'm this great Talmid Chacham, the leader of the Sanhedrin, I'm as if I'm 70 years old. And I never understood why it was that we are chayiv to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim at night until Ben Zoma came along. So I want to explain what this is saying. No problem, go, take your time. Just watch. Oh, there was a cup on the floor. No, I picked it up. Did I knock it over? I'm gonna put my cup. Okay.
I'll be done.
No problem. Okay. So this is a very interesting thing. So we have over here. There's a machlokas. We're going to see the machlokas in the Mishnah about how to learn a pasuk, and based on how we learn that pasuk is going to change the halacha of how and when we need to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right. So we know. Because we know the outcome of this machloka. So we know that there is a mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim for every Jewish man, let's say, day and night, right? Once in the morning and once at night, we have a mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, and this is why part of the mitzvah of Shema, the mitzvah of Kriya Shema that men have on Shachris and Ma'ariv, is to say the third paragraph of Shema, which is Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, so, but this was not a clear halacha. For a long period of time, there was a machlokas about this. And this piece of the Hagadah explains what this machlokas was, right? So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I never knew what the proof was for this. Talk to him. 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so I never knew what the proof was that we have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. Until Ben Zoma came along and darshaned it, right? and learned it out from the pasuk. So we're going to see what this means right now. The pasuk says like this: Okay, the pasuk says we are required to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim all the days of our life. Yemei chayecha. Why does it say kol yemei chayecha? It could have just said, Yemei chayecha. You have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim your whole life. Your life. What is your whole life, right? Just saying your life, obviously your whole life, right? So what does it mean, kol yemei chayecha? So the Mishnah says, yemei chayecha hayamim. The fact that it says yemei chayecha, that refers to the days. Kol yemei chayecha haleilos. What does kol teach us? Kol teaches us that there's something more. It's more than just remembering it, the days of your life. All the days of your life means day and night, right? This is a very typical drasha. This is the way that the Mishnah and the Gemara darshan psukim. They'll take an extra word, or sometimes even an extra letter that the pasuk would have made perfect sense without it, and say, well, then what is it coming here to teach us? And they'll use it for this. There's a big question, right? Well, it's not that they learned it from this or whether they had a Masorah about these halachos and they used the psukim in order to find a source, right? That's a different discussion, not for now. Okay, but the Chachamim said differently. The Chachamim Omrim, no, they said differently. Yemei chayecha olam hazeh. We have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, Yemei chayecha is in olam hazeh. Kol yemei chayecha lahavi lemos Mashiach. Even when Mashiach comes, we're still going to have a mitzvah of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? So we don't paskin this way, right? We paskin like Ben Zoma, not like the Chachamim. According to the Chachamim, you'd only have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim once a day, right? Not morning and night, just once. However, according to the Chachamim, even once Mashiach comes, we're still going to have a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? According to Ben Zoma, that's not the case. And according to the way we paskin the halacha, that's not the case. We have a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim daily and nightly. That's kol yemei chayecha, day and night. However, that's only for olam hazeh. Once Mashiach comes, there's not going to be any more need to remember Mitzrayim, right? Because according to Ben Zoma, once Mashiach comes, that Yeshua is going to be so great that's going to outshine Yetzias Mitzrayim to such a great degree. There's going to be no need to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim any longer. The Gemara says, Shraga b'tihara mimahani. If you have a candle in the daylight, it doesn't do anything, right? So the candle of Yetzias Mitzrayim, for us who are living in the darkness of Galus, so that candle is beautiful and it's bright, and we need that candle to remember it, right? Hashem. However, once the Geula Asida comes, once Mashiach comes, so we're going to be living in daylight, that candle, we're not even going to recognize it, right? The Geula of Mashiach is going to be so great compared to the Geula of Mitzrayim, we're not going to need to remember the Geula of Mitzrayim, and that's how we paskin. Okay, so we'll finish Metzram. We'll continue next time with